He was the man in the shadows, the gatekeeper, the power behind the throne. Martin Bormann controlled access to Adolf Hitler and wielded more power than almost anyone in Nazi Germany, yet few people outside the inner circle even knew his name. So what did Hitler's most trusted secretary actually do all day? How did a faceless bureaucrat become one of the most powerful men in the Third Reich? Did he spend his time taking dictation and filing papers? Or was there something far darker behind his role? And why, when the war ended, did he vanish so completely that some believed he had escaped to South America while others claimed he died in Berlin? Let's uncover the mysterious daily routine of the Nazi you've never heard of, but who might have been more dangerous than those whose names everyone knows. Martin Bormann woke up early every morning, usually around 6 a.m., hours before Hitler, who rarely rose before noon. This timing was strategic and gave Bormann enormous power. While the Führer slept, Bormann was already at work, shaping the information Hitler would see, controlling the narrative, and managing the flow of power through the Nazi regime. His early rising wasn't about being a morning person, it was about control. The first thing Bormann did each morning was review documents that had arrived overnight. Reports from across Germany and occupied territories, intelligence briefings, requests from various ministries, correspondence from party officials, all of it landed on Bormann's desk first. He would sit in his office, often still in the early darkness, reading through everything with meticulous attention to detail. He had a photographic memory and absorbed information like a machine, cataloging facts, names, and details that he would use later. But here's what made Bormann truly dangerous. He didn't just read these reports, he decided which ones Hitler would see. Every single piece of information that reached the Führer had to go through Bormann first. He was the filter, the gatekeeper of reality itself. If a report contained bad news that might upset Hitler or undermine Bormann's position, it might be buried or lost. If information could be used to advance Bormann's agenda or discredit his rivals, it would be prominently presented. He shaped Hitler's understanding of the world every single morning before Hitler even woke up. Who was this man who wielded such power? Martin Bormann was born in 1900 into an unremarkable middle-class family in Halberstadt, Germany. There was nothing special about him. Average height, average build, plain appearance. He was the kind of man you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him, and that became his greatest asset. He could fade into the background, be overlooked, underestimated. While others fought for the spotlight, Bormann worked in the shadows where real power lived. His early life gave no hint of the power he would later wield. He dropped out of high school and worked various agricultural jobs. He served briefly at the end of World War I, but never saw combat, arriving at the front just as the war ended. After the war, he drifted, working as a farm inspector and estate manager. He was nobody, going nowhere, until he found the Nazi Party. His path to power was unusual and violent. In 1924, he was convicted of murder as an accomplice in the killing of Walter Kadow, his former elementary school teacher. Kadow was suspected of betraying Albert Leo Schlageter, a Nazi hero, to French occupation authorities. Bormann and others beat Kadow to death in the woods. Bormann was sentenced to 1 year in prison. This conviction, rather than ending his prospects, enhanced his standing among Nazis who saw him as a loyal fighter willing to kill for the cause. He joined the Nazi Party in 1927 at age 27, and found his calling as an administrator. While others gave speeches and organized street fights, Bormann managed finances and logistics. He was meticulous, tireless, and absolutely loyal. He had a talent for organization that the chaotic Nazi Party desperately needed. He could take complex problems and break them down into manageable tasks. He could manage budgets, coordinate schedules, and keep track of countless details without ever seeming overwhelmed. By the early 1930s, he had become chief of staff to Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy. In this role, he essentially ran the party's administrative office, handling the boring but essential work that kept the Nazi machine running. He built relationships, accumulated information, and quietly made himself indispensable. When Hess made his bizarre solo flight to Scotland in 1941, Supposedly to negotiate peace with Britain, Bormann seized the opportunity and never let go. Within weeks, he had consolidated Hesse's former powers and positioned himself as Hitler's private secretary, a title that massively understates his actual power. He became the gatekeeper, controlling everything and everyone around the Führer. By 7 a.m., Bormann would be reviewing requests for meetings with Hitler. This was another crucial aspect of his power. If you wanted to see Hitler, you had to go through Bormann. He decided who got access and who didn't. He could make or break careers simply by granting or denying someone FaceTime with the Führer. Hermann Göring, once Hitler's designated successor and one of the most powerful men in Germany, found himself increasingly shut out. Joseph Goebbels had to curry favor with Bormann to maintain access. Heinrich Himmler, despite commanding the SS and controlling the concentration camp system, needed Bormann's approval to see Hitler. This wasn't just about scheduling appointments. Bormann actively worked to isolate Hitler from other Nazi leaders. He would delay meeting requests for weeks or months, claim Hitler was too busy, or suggest that matters could be handled through him instead. If someone managed to get a meeting, Bormann would be present, sitting quietly in the corner, making the visitor uncomfortable with his silent presence. The visitor knew that anything they said would be reported to Hitler later, filtered through Bormann's interpretation. Bormann also used his position to play Nazi leaders against each other. If Göring wanted something, Bormann might tell Hitler that Himmler had concerns about it. If Goebbels proposed a policy, Bormann might mention that Göring had tried something similar that failed. He created conflicts, fostered rivalries, and made sure that no one could form alliances against him. The other Nazi leaders spent so much time fighting each other that they never united against Bormann. He was particularly effective at undermining Göring, who he saw as lazy and corrupt. Bormann would make sure Hitler heard about Göring's failures in the Luftwaffe, about his drug addiction, about his theft of art from occupied territories. He planted seeds of doubt gradually, never making direct accusations, just ensuring that negative information reached Hitler's ears. Over time, Hitler's opinion of Göring deteriorated, and Bormann's influence grew proportionally. Over time, the other Nazi leaders realized they had to go through Bormann, which gave him leverage over all of them. He collected favors, created dependencies, and built a web of control that extended throughout the regime. If you wanted something from Hitler, you needed Bormann's goodwill, and Bormann never forgot a favor or a slight. Bormann kept detailed mental files on everyone in the Nazi hierarchy. He remembered who said what, who owed whom a favor, who had crossed whom. He cataloged their strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. This information was power, and Bormann used it ruthlessly. If someone opposed him, he would find ways to undermine them. If someone was useful, he would cultivate them. He played a long game, building his position piece by piece, day by day. Around 8 a.m., Bormann would typically have breakfast, usually something simple. He wasn't interested in luxury or fine dining like Göring. He was focused entirely on work and power. Food was fuel, nothing more. He might eat while continuing to read reports or make notes about the day's agenda. Every moment was productive, every minute used to consolidate his position and advance his goals. Unlike other Nazi leaders who indulged in excess, Bormann maintained an image of modest dedication to the party. By mid-morning, Bormann would begin his rounds, checking in with various offices and departments. He had placed his loyalists throughout the Nazi bureaucracy, people who reported to him and took his direction. Through this network, he extended his control far beyond just Hitler's immediate circle. He had eyes and ears everywhere. If something important happened anywhere in the Reich, Bormann knew about it, often before the officials nominally in charge. What most people don't understand about Bormann is that he wasn't interested in public recognition or glory. He actively avoided the spotlight. He rarely gave speeches, never sought publicity, and preferred to work behind the scenes. This was strategic. By remaining invisible, he avoided making enemies who might work against him publicly. By staying out of the public eye, he avoided accountability. When things went wrong, other people got blamed. When things went right, Hitler got the credit. Bormann didn't care as long as his power continued to grow. Around noon, when Hitler finally woke up, Bormann's most important work of the day began. He would be present at Hitler's morning routine, briefing him on the day's schedule, presenting selected documents and reports, and managing the flow of people who needed to see the Führer. Hitler came to depend on Bormann completely. He trusted Bormann to handle details, to make things happen, to deal with the boring administrative work that Hitler detested. Bormann attended nearly every meeting Hitler had, sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes, rarely speaking unless asked a direct question, but his presence was significant. Everyone knew that Bormann was listening, remembering, cataloging. If you said something in front of Bormann, Hitler would eventually hear about it, filtered through Bormann's perspective. If you promised Hitler something, Bormann would make sure you delivered or make sure Hitler knew you had failed. He was like Hitler's external brain, remembering things the Führer forgot and following up on details that Hitler didn't have time for. This constant presence gave Bormann another form of power. He understood Hitler's thinking better than anyone else. He knew what Hitler wanted, often before Hitler himself fully articulated it. This deep understanding allowed Bormann to issue orders in the Führer's name, and people would obey because everyone knew Bormann spoke for Hitler. Sometimes these were genuine orders from Hitler that Bormann was transmitting. Sometimes they were Bormann's own ideas that he knew Hitler would approve of. And sometimes historians suspect they were purely Bormann's initiatives that he presented as Hitler's will. Lunch was often taken with Hitler and whatever guests or officials were present. Bormann would sit at the table, eating quickly and quietly while listening to every word of the conversation. Hitler's lunch sessions could last for hours, filled with the Führer's long monologues about history, art, architecture, and his plans for the future. Bormann absorbed it all, never interrupting, never drawing attention to himself, just listening and learning. While others at the table might zone out during Hitler's repetitive monologues, Bormann paid attention to everything. He would notice when Hitler expressed interest in something, when he showed annoyance, when he made an offhand comment that might later become important. This attention to detail, this ability to decode Hitler's rambling thoughts and turn them into actionable policies made Bormann invaluable in the milieu. Afternoons, Bormann would handle the enormous volume of paperwork that came with running the Nazi Party and managing Hitler's affairs. He signed documents, issued orders, responded to correspondence, and made decisions on hundreds of matters both large and small. He was extraordinarily efficient, able to process massive amounts of information and make quick decisions. Unlike Hitler, who procrastinated and avoided difficult decisions, Bormann was decisive and relentless. One of Bormann's most sinister roles was as administrator of Hitler's personal finances and the Nazi Party's money. He controlled vast sums, including funds extracted from Jewish victims, profits from slave labor, and revenue from various Nazi enterprises. Bormann used this money to enrich himself enormously, building a personal fortune while maintaining his image as a simple, dedicated party servant. He acquired property across Germany and Austria, established secret bank accounts in Switzerland and other neutral countries, and created a financial empire, all while claiming to live modestly for the cause. He was particularly skilled at hiding his corruption. While Goering openly looted art and lived in ostentatious luxury, Bormann was subtle. He would acquire properties through intermediaries, hide assets in shell companies, and take payments that couldn't be traced. He accumulated wealth methodically and quietly, never drawing attention to his growing fortune. After the war, investigators discovered he had been one of the richest men in Germany, yet during his lifetime, few people knew about his wealth. Bormann also managed the Führer's personal fortune, including royalties from Mein Kampf, which made Hitler incredibly wealthy. Hitler claimed to live simply and donate his salary to charity, but Bormann managed millions in Hitler's name, investing in properties and businesses. This financial intimacy gave Bormann yet another form of leverage. He knew where every penny came from and where it went. He could bury financial irregularities for people he favored or expose them for people he wanted to destroy. He also used financial control as another means of power. He could approve or deny funding for projects, reward loyalists with money and resources, and punish enemies by cutting off their access to funds. Many Nazi programs and initiatives required Bormann's approval, not because he had official authority over them, but because he controlled the money that funded them. Want to build a new concentration camp? Need funds for a weapons program? Require money to publish propaganda? All of it went through Bormann. This financial power, combined with his control over access to Hitler and information, made him virtually untouchable by the middle years of the war. Bormann was also deeply involved in some of the Nazi regime's worst crimes, though he typically worked behind the scenes. He was instrumental in the persecution of Christian churches, working to undermine and eventually eliminate Christianity in Germany. He saw the churches as competition for loyalty and wanted to replace Christian faith with worship of Hitler and the Nazi state. He issued directives limiting church activities, confiscating church property, and persecuting clergy who opposed Nazi policies. In one particularly chilling directive from 1941, Bormann wrote that National Socialism and Christianity were incompatible, and that the influence of the churches must be completely eliminated. He didn't want to create martyrs through public persecution, so he advocated for a gradual erosion of church power through administrative measures. Close a seminary here, confiscate property there, arrest a troublesome priest on some pretext. Death by 1,000 cuts, all managed through bureaucratic channels. Bormann was also involved in the Holocaust, signing orders related to the deportation of Jews and the administration of concentration camps. While he didn't design the extermination system like Heydrich or run it like Himmler, he facilitated it through his administrative role. He made sure the bureaucratic machinery of genocide ran smoothly, that resources were allocated, that reports reached the right people, that the trains ran on time to the death camps. He was a key enabler of mass murder, treating genocide as just another administrative task to be managed efficiently. His afternoons also included meetings with various Nazi officials, but these were different from the morning sessions with Hitler. These were Bormann's meetings, where he issued instructions, gathered information, and maintained his network of control. He would receive reports from his people throughout the government and party apparatus. He would give orders, sometimes in Hitler's name, sometimes in his own. He would resolve disputes, make decisions, and ensure that things went according to his plans. What made Bormann particularly dangerous was his combination of bureaucratic skill and complete ruthlessness. He understood how systems worked, how to use rules and procedures to his advantage, how to manipulate bureaucracy to concentrate power. But he had no moral constraints whatsoever. He would destroy anyone who got in his way, use any means necessary to achieve his goals, and sacrifice anyone if it served his purposes. This combination of administrative genius and moral bankruptcy made him one of the most effective and dangerous Nazis. He was also a devoted family man, at least in his own twisted way. Bormann had 10 children with his wife Gerda, and she was as fanatical a Nazi as he was, but even his family life was strange and disturbing. He maintained a long-term affair with an actress named Manja Behrens, and his wife not only knew about it, but approved. In letters, Gerda even encouraged Martin to have children with his mistress, suggesting they could all live together. This bizarre arrangement reflected the Nazi obsession with breeding and producing as many Aryan children as possible. Bormann's letters to his wife, discovered after the war, reveal a man obsessed with Nazi ideology and absolutely convinced of his own righteousness. He wrote about the need to eliminate Christianity, the importance of racial purity, and his certainty that Germany would triumph. He saw himself as a faithful servant of Hitler and the movement, never questioning the morality of what he was doing, only concerned with doing it efficiently. By evening, when Hitler's notorious late-night sessions began, Bormann was always there. Hitler would stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. talking, watching movies, or discussing his plans. And Bormann would be there, no matter how late, no matter how tired, always present, always listening, always serving. This constant presence reinforced Hitler's dependence on him and his indispensability to the regime. Other Nazi leaders had homes to go to, families to see, lives outside of Hitler's immediate circle. Bormann had none of that, or rather, he sacrificed all of it to maintain his position at Hitler's side. During these late-night sessions, Hitler would often make spontaneous decisions or issue verbal orders. Bormann would note them all, and the next day he would turn Hitler's rambling thoughts into formal orders and directives. This gave Bormann enormous power to interpret and shape Hitler's will. A vague comment by Hitler could become a detailed order drafted by Bormann. An offhand remark could be transformed into official policy. And because Bormann was the one documenting these sessions, there was no one to contradict his version of what Hitler had said or meant. These late-night sessions also served another purpose for Bormann. They allowed him to isolate Hitler even further from other advisors. While other Nazi leaders were home sleeping, Bormann was there providing companionship, agreeing with everything Hitler said, and reinforcing Hitler's decisions. This constant reinforcement made Hitler even more dependent on Bormann and less likely to seek other opinions. Bormann would sometimes not get to bed until 4 or 5 a.m., only to be up again at 6 o'clock to start the cycle over. This grueling schedule would have broken most people, but Bormann thrived on it. The lack of sleep, the constant work, the pressure, none of it seemed to bother him. He was driven by an insatiable hunger for power and control, and he was willing to sacrifice everything, including his own health and well-being, to maintain and expand his position. As the war turned against Germany, Bormann's power actually increased. As Hitler became more isolated and erratic, retreating into his bunker and losing touch with reality, Bormann became even more essential. He was the bridge between Hitler and the outside world. The interpreter of the Führer's increasingly incoherent orders, the man who kept the regime functioning even as it collapsed around them. By 1945, Bormann was arguably the second most powerful man in Germany. Göring had been stripped of his positions for attempting to take power when Hitler was trapped in Berlin. Himmler had been declared a traitor for attempting to negotiate surrender. Goebbels remained, but even he operated in Bormann's shadow. Bormann had outlasted them all through patient accumulation of power and absolute loyalty to Hitler. In the final days in Hitler's bunker in Berlin, as Soviet forces closed in, Bormann remained at Hitler's side. He witnessed Hitler's marriage to Eva Braun in the early hours of April 29, 1945. He was present when Hitler dictated his final political testament, which expelled both Göring and Himmler from the party for treason but said nothing negative about Bormann. In fact, Hitler's testament appointed Bormann as party minister, ensuring his position would continue even after Hitler's death. This final stamp of approval from Hitler was the culmination of Bormann's years of patient loyalty and manipulation. Bormann was one of the last people to see Hitler alive before the Führer and his new wife committed suicide on April 30, 1945. According to witnesses, Bormann was visibly shaken by Hitler's death, perhaps genuinely grieving or perhaps realizing that his entire basis of power had just evaporated. Without Hitler, Bormann was nothing. All his influence had come from his position as Hitler's gatekeeper. With Hitler gone, the gate no longer mattered. After Hitler's death, Bormann attempted to negotiate with Soviet forces, apparently still believing he had some authority. When these attempts failed, he decided to try to escape from Berlin. On the night of May 1, 1945, he joined a group that included Hitler youth leader Arthur Axmann and Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger. They tried to break through Soviet lines that had encircled the city. What happened next remains one of World War II's enduring mysteries. The official account, based primarily on testimony from Arthur Axmann, claims that Bormann and Stumpfegger died that night near the Lehrter railway station in Berlin. Axmann claimed he saw both men dead on a bridge, apparently having taken cyanide capsules rather than be captured. But Axmann's testimony was problematic. He was trying to avoid prosecution himself and may have had reasons to lie. And crucially, no bodies were found at the time to confirm his story. Some believed he made it to South America, like other Nazi war criminals. There were reported sightings in Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile. The CIA and other intelligence agencies investigated these reports for years. In 1972, bones were found in Berlin near where Bormann was last seen. And in 1998, DNA testing confirmed they were his remains. The official conclusion is that Martin Bormann died in Berlin on May 1st or 2, 1945, trying to escape the Soviet advance. But questions remain. Why did it take so long to find the body? How did the bones end up where they were found? Some historians still suspect that Bormann may have initially escaped and died later, with his remains planted in Berlin. The truth may never be fully known, which is somehow fitting for a man who spent his entire career operating in the shadows, leaving few traces, remaining invisible, while wielding enormous power. So what did Martin Bormann actually do all day? He woke early and shaped the information Hitler received. He controlled access to the Führer and used that control to accumulate power. He managed money, signed death warrants, and persecuted churches, all while maintaining an image of modest dedication. He attended every meeting, listened to every conversation, and remembered everything. He stayed up late into the night serving Hitler, only to wake early and begin again. Bormann represents a particularly insidious form of evil. He wasn't a zealot like Goebbels, obsessed with ideology and propaganda. He wasn't a sadist like some SS officers who took pleasure in cruelty. He was a bureaucrat, a manager, an administrator who used his skills to enable and facilitate the worst crimes imaginable. He shows us that you don't need to be a monster to do monstrous things. You just need to be efficient, loyal to evil leadership, and willing to put your considerable talents in service of a terrible cause. His invisibility was his strength. While history remembers Hitler, Himmler, Goering, and Goebbels, Bormann is often overlooked despite being arguably more powerful than any of them by the end. He didn't need fame or recognition, he just needed power, and he accumulated more of it than almost anyone in the Third Reich. He was the man behind the curtain, the puppet master who let others take the spotlight while he pulled the strings. What do you think? Was Martin Bormann actually the most powerful Nazi after Hitler? Could the regime have functioned without him managing all the details Hitler couldn't be bothered with? And did he really die in Berlin? Or did he escape and live out his days in hiding? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this look at one of history's most overlooked but dangerous figures compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest corners of history. Thanks for watching.